السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد. So last week we were talking about al-mas'h al-khuffayn. We talked about how and the length of time that a muqim, a person who is not traveling, can make mas'h, and the length of time that a musafir can also make mas'h. We talked about how if the socks are thick enough, then it does not really matter what material they are made of, as long as they are made of some kind of material and not something else like metal or glass. Then we talked about the way a person, the kayfiyah, how does a person make mas'h on the khuffayn. We talked about how it is thabit from the hadith, and that a person makes mas'h on the khuffayn from the top with 3 fingers. It is very easy. So now inshallah we will discuss the bab of just general najasah and how to attain cleanliness from it. So this will talk about the 2 types of najasah, the two types of impurities in the Sharia, in fiqh, which are the heavier impurity, which is also known as ghalidha, and the second is the lighter impurity, which is known as khafifa. And so impurities are of 2 types. The first one is ghalidha, and so ghalidha is going to be the heavier impurity, which means that if a small amount, the size of about a quarter, if more than the size of a quarter gets on your clothes, or it gets on your place of prayer, or it gets on your body, then you are required, and it's necessary to wash to wash it off, or if it is of a if it's dry, then to scrape it off, and basically to remove that najasa. And then khafifa would be much lighter, and so the ruling and the hukum will be much lighter. And so the different types of ghalidha are khamr, which is wine, blood that is flowing, so blood that flows from the wound, that is ghalidha, and the meat of a dead animal, the meat of a meita, not a dhabiha but a meita, and the skin of a dead animal, the urine in general, and urine of especially of those animals that you cannot eat. So, for example, an animal that we cannot eat, like a lion, the urine will be ghalidha. And so if more than a quarter-sized amount, a 25 cents size amount falls on a person's body, clothes, or place of prayer, he or she will have to wash that. The saliva of a dog also falls under this hukum according to the Hanafi madhab, and the droppings or the droppings of wild animals and the saliva of wild animals, the droppings of chickens and ducks as well will fall under ghalidha. Also, what falls under ghalidha will be anything that comes out of the body of man. So anything that comes out that breaks the wudu. So anything, if it comes out of a human being and it breaks the wudu, that is also going to be considered ghalidha. And so, for example, that would be urine, stool, that blood, vomit, all of this stuff will be najasat ghalidha. And so if any of these things, if any of them fall onto a person's clothes or body, and they exceed that amount, the size of a dirham, or the size of a quarter, or the size of the middle part of your palm, then a person will have to wash that. And this is the collective size. So if a person has multiple drops of blood all over his clothes, and they all equal to the size that is in the middle of his palm, then he is required to wash all of them off. He is going to be required to remove that. Otherwise, he will not be able to pray in those clothes. He has to remove his clothes, or change into new clothes, change into clean clothes, or he has to remove that blood by washing it 3 times. And so if something that comes out of a human body, but it does not break the wudu, like sweat does not break the wudu. No matter how much a person sweats, his or her wudu will not be broken. And also saliva. The saliva of a person, even a non-Muslim, is not najasat. It's not najis. So if it falls on your body, if it falls on your clothes, then it will not render it najis, it will not render it impure, even the saliva of a non-Muslim. Yes, if the saliva has khamr, or if it has some kind of najis in that saliva, and that najis is overwhelming on the saliva, then that saliva will be considered najis. And so if a drunk person basically, falls onto you and starts drooling onto you, and you can tell that his saliva has khamr in it, then you will have to wash that off before you pray, or for you to be considered pure and clean. So that was going to be ghalidha. Now for khafifa, the ruling is basically the amount that falls onto your body can be more than that of a quarter size, so more than that of the size of a dirham, more than that of the palm of your hand, but it may not exceed quarter of your overall clothes. So it may not exceed 1/4 or quarter of all of the clothes that you are wearing, or that specific cloth that you are wearing. Like for example, if you have a t-shirt, and that t-shirt, some horse urine falls onto that t-shirt, or falls onto that pants, and if it exceeds, or if it splashes onto the pants, and if it exceeds quarter amount of that pants, or of that shirt, or of that dress, or of that particular clothing, then that will turn into ghalidha. You will have to wash that off. You will not be able to pray in that, and you will have to remove that najis before you attempt to do any a'mal, anything that is pure. So an example of khafifa, which I just mentioned, like the urine of a horse, and also the urine of those animals which we are allowed to eat. So the urine of sheep, of cows, of other animals that we are allowed to eat, their urine is going to be najasa khafifa. And that means that if the urine falls onto the body, or the place of prayer, or the clothes of a person, then it has to be a significant amount for that person to now have to wash it off and to remove that najis. And that significant amount is a quarter of the overall area of the body or the place of prayer or the clothes that it falls on. Also, the droppings of birds that we cannot eat. So the droppings of birds that we cannot eat. Now the droppings of wild animals, so not birds that we cannot eat, like lions and the likes of that, their droppings will be ghalidha. Their droppings will not be khafifa. But the droppings of birds that we cannot eat, their droppings will be khafifa. And so, for example, a bird that we cannot eat would be like a parrot comes to mind. A parrot, if that parrot does some dropping and it falls on you, then it will be considered khafifa. And this is if you consider that you cannot eat the parrot. But if you have a bird, if you know of a bird that you cannot eat, that bird is still the droppings of that bird is still going to be is not going to be ghalidha, but it is going to be khafifa. And so if a bird decides to that you are a target and targets you with his dropping, then you do not have to wash that off unless it exceeds quarter amount of the clothes you are wearing. Now, if you have a piece of cloth, a garment, or an area that was najis and it dried up, then that area and that is now considered clean again. So, if, for example, if you have a bed and that bed was najis, but then it dried up, that bed is not najis anymore. That bed is clean. Now, if that bed gets wet again, then it will be as if the najasa is there again. It is rehydrated, you could say, and then you will have to remove that najasa. So if there is najasa somewhere and it dries up, then that area becomes clean. The najasa is not clean, but because it is dry, it is in a dry state, it is considered clean. And so if you sit on a bed that was najis, but that najasa was dry, then that najasa does not get onto you. But if that najasa was now wet, then that najasa will pass on to you. And so this is why if you were sleeping on a bed and that bed was najis and you happen to sweat in your sleep and the sweat basically rehydrated that najasa, then your clothes that got wet from the sweat will be najis and you will have to wash everything. But if you were sleeping on a bed, or if you were sitting on a couch, that was najis, but that najasa was dry, then your clothes are still not considered najis. Your clothes are still not considered najis. Yes, we would feel that we're sitting on a couch that has dried up, for example, dried up urine on it. If you're sitting on a couch that has dried up urine on it, then yes, we would feel that it is dirty. But according to the Sharia, as long as it is dry and you did not make it wet again, then your clothes are fine. From a hukmi perspective, your clothes are fine, and you can still pray in that you wouldn't have to wash your clothes and you would not have to change your clothes to pray. Same way, if you have a basket of laundry and you have some najis clothes in that basket, and somehow some clean clothes fall into that basket. Now, according to the Sharia, those clean clothes, they will not become najis. They will still be considered clean. They will still be considered clean. Now, if there is some kind of athar, there is a sign of dampness on the clean clothes, then both of them will become najis. The clothes that are najis, they will remain impure, and the clothes that were clean and they fell into that basket, because they now became damp because of the impurity of the najis clothes, they will also become najis. And so this is why I mentioned that once it dries up, then it does not pass the najis over to anything else. In of itself, it is still najis. In of itself, it is still najis. So you cannot say that if you, for example, if you, somehow if you messed your pants and it dries up after a while, you cannot say that, because the urine is now dry, I can pray salah because it is dry. No, the clothes you are wearing is still najis. This we're talking about if a place or clothes, they won't pass the najasa on to other clothes. They won't pass the najasa on to a person's body. For example, if a person is wearing clean clothes and he sits on a couch that is najis, then his clean clothes won't become najis if that couch was dry. And the same thing if a person has impure clothes in a laundry basket, or he wraps impure clothes with clean clothes, then those clean clothes will not become dirty as long as those dirty clothes were dry. Now, if those dirty clothes were wet and there is a dampness from the dirty clothes that passes on to the clean clothes, and now the clean clothes are feeling damp, then both of them will now become najis, and you will not be able to use either of them. Now, sometimes when it's quite windy, sometimes a piece of najasa, of dried up najasa, like a piece of dung, for example, can fly into a person's onto a person's clothes. Then what is the hukum of that? And the same thing will be as long as it is dry and there is no athar. If you are walking and somehow it's very windy, and so some dried dog stool falls onto your clothes, but then it does not, like it was dry, and so it simply just falls away, and there is no visible athar on the clothes that of that dog stool. Your clothes will not become najis. Your clothes will remain pure. You will be able to pray in those clothes. Now, if instead that was dog urine or dog saliva, because it is wet, so a wet thing will not just fly into your clothes and then simply fall off, but it will be absorbed by your clothes, and so then of course you will have to wash your clothes if it exceeds the minimum amount. And so if there is a dry piece of najis, if there's a dry piece of najasa, then as long as it does not affect anything visibly, that will be that place, that clothing, that person's body will be completely fine. Now, if it does fly into your clothes and it leaves a mark, if it leaves like a stain, and you can see that it has left a stain, that means that it was not dry and it has passed the najis onto your clothes. So it has made your clothes impure, and so you will not be able to pray in that. You will have to remove the najasa. Now, how will you remove the najasa? For example, if there is something that goes by the visuals, so something like stool, something that a person can see that, oh, this is najis, like blood. A person that has blood on his clothes, you could see, unless of course the person is wearing a red shirt. But if the person is wearing a white shirt, then you can see the blood on the clothes. If a person is wearing a white shirt or white pants, you can see the stool and the stain of the impurity on the clothes. And so how will you know the najasa is removed and that cloth is clean again? Simply the moment you cannot see visibly the najasa. So it does not have to smell different. It does not have to look completely different. As long as you cannot see the najasa, though that clothing is now considered pure. And there may be a smell, there may be some other thing, but as long as you cannot see the najasa, you are good to go, and you can pray in that clothing. Now, this is only going to be applied for those types of impurities that are visual, so like blood, like you could say like vomit, like stool, something like that. Now, for something that you are unable to see, for example, like urine, you would unless it is quite visible, you would not be able to see it on your clothes. If a person is wearing darker colored clothing, then a person is not able to differentiate between it being wet with water or it being wet with urine. And so how will a person know that the urine is now gone? He will have to wash that clothing 3 times. So he will wash that clothing 3 times. He will wash the area of the clothing 3 times. So for example, if you have urine on your sleeve, you will remove your clothes and you will wash your sleeve 3 times. And each time you wash your sleeve, you will soak it in water and you will squeeze it until most of the water comes out. So you will squeeze it as much as possible, and then you will soak it again, and then you will squeeze it as much as possible, and then you will soak it in water again, and then you will squeeze it as much as possible. Of course, logically, you would be using new water each time, so you would not dip the sleeve into a bucket, because then you will just be using najis water. And then after that, whether or not the smell is there, whether or not the stain is there, that clothing is considered pure, and you can pray in that clothing. Now, you do not just have to, or you don't just have to use water. You could use anything that is known to remove impurities. So for example, you could use what is modern day, like what we have detergents. We have detergents that don't require water. We have detergents that don't need any water at all. And a lot of times we see these detergents, these sprays that are quite common when going camping and when going into the wild. To conserve water, they have these sprays, they have these soaps that don't need any water at all. And so you can simply remove the impurity by the chemical in that detergent, by the chemical in that soap. And that will also remove the impurity. So it does not have to be pure water to remove the impurity. This is not like wudu. Wudu, you have to use pure water. So if you make wudu with soapy water, that wudu is not going to be valid, because you have to make wudu with pure water. But for removing the najasa, the idea is that whatever way the najasa is removed, that is fine according to the Sharia. Whether you remove it by tearing the piece of cloth off, or you remove it by using a water-free kind of solution, or you remove it by soaking the clothing in a river 3 times and then squeezing it each and every time. It does not matter according to the Sharia, as long as that najis gets removed and there is no athar of that najasa left. That najasa will be considered removed and the clothing will be considered tahir, and you can pray on with that clothing, or on that prayer mat, or you could sit on that couch or sit on that bed, and that will not render your clothes impure. Now this was mostly about things that absorb the najasa. Now there are some materials like leather that does not necessarily absorb the najasa, like a shoe, or like if a person is wearing like a waterproof kind of plastic kind of jacket or something like that. It's made of polyester or something like that. Then that does not absorb the najasa, and so if najasa happens to fall on that kind of material, a material that does not absorb liquids, then simply by scraping the najasa off, that will be considered fine, and a person will be able to continue with a prayer, and he will be able to consider his clothing pure as long as he removes that najasa. And so if a person has najasa that fell on a shoe, then he does not necessarily have to he does not have to soak his shoe 3 times and then squeeze each time. He simply can just remove the najasa by scraping it off. And this is not just the case if it's dry. Even if it is wet, if a person has like some kind of wet najasa that falls on a leather shoe, then by just removing that najasa, even if it's wet, that najasa will be considered removed. And he won't have to like soak it in water and wash it thoroughly. As long as it's removed, it's considered tahir. Now, if there is a portion of the earth, of the ground, a like stone, a stony area, or something like that, a patch of grass, and a person knows that there is some najasa, this is a dog park, or this is where a dog has urinated, or a person has urinated, but now it is completely dry. It is completely dry, and this person needs to pray his salah. He can pray the salah as long as there is no visible najasa, as long as there is no visible impurity, as long as there is no dog stool that is visible. He is able to pray there, but he will not be able to make tayammum. He will not be able to make tayammum from that piece, from that patch of earth, or from that stony area. He will not be able to make tayammum, although he will be able to pray. Now, obviously, if he is he goes close and he can smell the najasa, or if he can see the najasa, it is wet, or if there is a piece of stool that he can see, obviously he is not going to be allowed to pray in that area, nor will he be able to make tayammum from that area. He must find a different area, an area that is clean. Now, when it comes to animals, it is allowed for us that even though we cannot eat certain animals, we are still allowed to use their skin. But the method for that is that a person needs to slaughter that animal in a halal manner. So a person has to slaughter that animal in a halal manner, and then he will be able to use that skin after, of course, making that skin or tanning that skin. He will be able to use that skin. That skin will be considered pure. That like leather, that will be considered clean. That will not be considered najis. And this does not just go for animals that we can eat, like leather that comes from cows, or like sheep skin, not or yeah, so sheep skin, not the wool. The wool is obviously going to be fine, but the skin of the sheep, the skin of the goat, that is of course going to be fine as long as a person tans it. But also an animal that we may not be able to eat, like the meat of a donkey. We are not allowed to eat the meat of a donkey. But if a person wants to use the skin of the donkey and he slaughters the donkey in a halal manner, then he might not be able to. He still won't be able to eat the meat, but he can tan that skin and he can use that skin. And so if a person wants the himarun wahshi, which is the zebra, if a person wants a zebra skin, then if that zebra was slaughtered in a halal manner, and that skin was now tanned and it's now completely dry, then a person can use that skin, and that skin is now going to be halal. Okay, so for the halal animals, a person has to, of course, slaughter that animal in a halal manner. But for animals like a zebra, I made a mistake. For animals like a zebra, it is not necessary that a person slaughters the animal in a halal manner. So if there is a meita, a dead zebra, and the person skins the dead zebra and takes the skin and tans it, that skin will be completely halal for that person to use. Likewise, if there is another animal like a lion that is dead, and a person skins the lion, takes the or tans the skin and takes the skin for himself, that skin is going to be pure. It's going to be halal. A person can wear a lion skin and pray salah. That is completely fine. The only two exceptions would be the skin of a khinzir, of a pig, and that is for obvious reasons, and also the skin of a human being, even a kafir, and obviously because we respect the human being, and that is why it is haram to use any part of the human being for any kind of for any kind of thing. Once it comes out of the human being, even the hair and the nails, once it is removed from the human being, then it should be disposed of, or it should be buried. It should not be used for anything. So this would of course extend to the skin of a human being. A person cannot use the skin of a human being or any part of the human being, even a non-Muslim, because we respect the human, because it is because of the creation of the human being itself. And of course the pig, we cannot use it because it is najisul ayn. Every single part of the pig is completely haram and it is completely najis. every single part of the body that does not have blood flowing through it, that will not be considered najis if it is removed from the body. So if a person cuts his nails, there is no blood that is running through the nails, so that is not considered najis. That if a person cuts hair, the hair is not considered najis. If a person shaves his mustache, or shaves or cleans the ear or anything like that, even though it may be what we consider to be dirty, it is still not going to be considered najis, as long as there is no blood flowing through it. So the bones of a human being, we have archaeologists, they dig up the bones of a human being. That is not najis. That is touching that won't make your clothes najis. That is not najis. Now, if there is some kind of wetness on those bones, there is not to get too explicit, but there is something on the bones, or there's some blood or something like that, of course then it will be najis. And if it gets onto your clothes, then you will have to remove that before you pray. Now the musk, the if you didn't know, but musk comes from the musk deer, and also the musk cat, which I did not know about this, but there is a cat that also has musk, and so the musk, that is the musk pouch that is in these animals, that is also going to be tahir, that is also going to be pure. And if it happens to fall into the clothes or something like that, it is not going to render anything impure. It is also halal to eat. And this is the musk of the deer and the musk of the cat. And so if a person takes this musk, and although the process of making musk is one has to soak it in a mixture of alcohol for a long time to get the smell, but if a person takes this musk straight from the pouch and uses it, he can use it as a perfume, and he can pray salah with it. It is completely fine. And so with that, we talked a bit about the different types of najasat, the different types of impurities. We talked about najasat ghaliza, which is the heavier impurity, and it is something like blood, like urine, like stool, like the urine of some animal that we cannot eat, like a dog or a cat, or the blood of those animals that we cannot eat, like a dog or a cat. That is all going to be considered a heavy najasa. And so if a small amount, the size bigger than a quarter, bigger than the middle of your palm, if it falls onto your clothing, or if drops fall and they all equal to the size of a quarter, then you will have to remove that if you wish to pray, or if you wish to or if you want to do something like tawaf. If not, if there is a tiny drop of blood on your clothes, that is completely fine. So if you pop a pimple and there's a small drop of blood on your clothes, you do not have to remove that. You do not have to wash that. You can still pray in that. Now, if that blood does exceed a quarter, or if you go on a pimple popping spree and you pop a whole bunch of pimples and they all equal to that amount, then you will have to remove all of that blood if you wish to pray. Otherwise, the salah will not be valid, and you have to remove that. You cannot just remove a few of the blood and then leave the rest. You have to remove all of the blood. Likewise, if there is somehow, if your pet, like cat or dog, if it licks you, this just goes for the dog. if the dog, because the saliva of the dog is also najis, and so if your pet dog licks you, or if a stranger's dog somehow licks you or licks your clothing, you will have to wash that off. Otherwise, you will not be able to pray in that, because that is considered najis and also ghalidha. So even a small amount, you will have to wash it off. And of course, the dung and the droppings and the urine of the cat and the dog will both be considered ghalidha. And this goes for any animal that we are not allowed to eat. So like a zebra, like an elephant, like a lion, we're not allowed to eat that. Its droppings and its urine will be ghalidha for us. And likewise for wild animals and animals that hunt other animals, their saliva will also be considered ghalidha, because their saliva could contain traces of blood or of the meat of other animals, and the meat of animals is going to be considered ghalidha. It's going to be considered, najasa, the ghalidha. And so the saliva of animals, like of predatory animals, that will also be considered ghalidha. Now, this is just in terms of land animals. If you have, terms of ground animals, you have birds. So birds will be completely, or will be slightly different. That yes, a bird that preys on other birds, a bird that hunts other birds, that the saliva of that bird will also be considered ghalidha. But the bird that we are not allowed to eat, like a parrot, the saliva and the droppings of that bird will not be considered ghalidha. But then we have the chicken and the duck, and even though we can eat those animals, their droppings will be considered ghalidha. Their droppings will be considered the heavy najasa. And then from there we go to everything that comes out of the human being. Everything that comes out of the human being that breaks the wudu. So urine, stool, vomit, blood, everything that breaks the wudu will also be considered ghalidha. But everything that does not break the wudu, like sweat, saliva, even of a kafir, a person's nasal discharge, or something from the ear, if it does not break the wudu, then it is completely fine, and it is not considered najis at all. Then we go to how does a person remove the najasa. And so if it is a najasa that a person can visibly tell, like stool, blood, or vomit, then once the sign of that najasa is removed, then that is considered pure. And so a person does not have to remove the smell, a person does not have to remove the discoloration completely, but as long as the athar of the najasa, as long as the stain of the najasa is gone, that najasa is considered to be gone. What can a person use to remove najasa? A person can use water, a person can use any chemical that is considered to be removing of impurities. So a person can use soap, detergent, soapy water, and even though a person cannot make wudu with soapy water, a person can remove impurities with soapy water. And so one cannot apply the rules of wudu to this because they are slightly different. And so with that, we go to what happens when the najasa, or how do we remove najasa that one cannot visibly tell, like urine or semen. How does a person tell when that is completely pure? And for that, if the semen is wet, then a person will have to wash it. A person will have to, if it's urine, a person will have to wash that area or that clothing 3 times, and he will have to squeeze each time. And for semen, if it becomes dry and a person scrapes it off, then it is that clothing is going to be considered tahir. It's going to be considered pure. By pure, we don't mean that a person considers that he is better than everyone else. By pure, we're talking about pure enough to pray salah. We are talking about pure enough to be able to perform the different acts of worship that a person has to be pure to perform, like praying, touching the Quran, making a tawaf of the Kaaba, and according to some, even entering and sitting in the masjid. And so with that, we have a few exceptions that some people may commonly consider to be impure. Number one, the parts of the body that blood does not flow through. So the parts of the body that blood does not flow through, like the nails, hair, and the nails, hair, and other areas of the of a person's body that blood does not flow through. If that falls onto a person, then that will not render a person's clothing najis. That will be completely fine. Although a person should bury the nails and hair or dispose of it in a proper manner. Also, the bones of a human being will also not be considered najis as long as there is no blood that is visible on it. There is no nerve endings, or there is no piece of tissue on the bones with blood on it. That will also be completely fine if it's completely dry. And then we go to najasa, that once it dries up, it is still considered to be impure in of itself, but it won't be considered to make other things impure. And this is very important for us to know, because if a person has a couch that a dog urinated on, and that couch is wet, that couch is considered to be impure, and it is also considered to make other things impure. So if a person sits on that couch or puts clean clothes on that couch, and those clothes get damp, or that person's pants gets damp because of the impurity, that najasa will pass on from the couch to the pants or to the clothing. And so both of those things will now become najis. But if it is dry, it is still considered to be impure. The couch will not become pure, but if a person sits on the couch and there is no athar, there is no sign of dampness or impurity on that person's clothing, then his clothing will not be najis, and he will still be tahir. And likewise, if a person wants to pray on an area where he knows there is some najasa, but it was a long time ago and it is completely dry, that area will be fine for that person to pray on. But it won't be fine for that person to make tayammum on that area. Because for tayammum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. A person has to not only, does it have to be portion of the earth or something from the earth, but it has to be pure. It has to be completely clean. It cannot be dirty. It cannot be najis in any way. Even though it is dry, it is still considered najis. It is just not passing the najisness onto anything else. And so with that, we concluded the different or a few miscellaneous aspects of tahara, and how to remove the impurities, and how to remove the different najasat, the heavy impurities and the light impurities. And so if anyone does have any questions about this, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, inshallah, we will continue next week. We will do Babul Hayd wal Istihada, which even though it is mostly meant for the women, but it is also important for the men to know, so as to help the women and to also be able to understand this chapter. So inshallah, next week we will do Bab al-Haydi wal-Istihada according to the Hanafi fiqh. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.